Hold your hand in front of your face and press your palm flat against the other one. Push. Feel that resistance, that hard refusal of one hand to pass through the other. Here is the thing you were never told. Almost nothing is there. If you remove the empty space from every atom in your body, what remained would be smaller than a grain of salt. And yet your hands don't pass through each other. So if you are more than 99.9999% nothing, what exactly is stopping your palms from meeting? The word empty is where everyone goes wrong, and I want to fix that in the first minute because the popular version of this fact is half a lie. You've heard it 100 times. Atoms are mostly empty space. We're all basically ghosts. Reality is an illusion. That framing will leave you understanding less than when you started. The truth is stranger and more useful. The solidity you feel is real, it is measurable, and it has almost nothing to do with matter touching matter. It comes from a force and a rule, one that pushes, one that forbids. And the rule is the part nobody explains, because it sounds impossible until you see how it works. Let me build the empty part first, honestly, because you need the scale to feel the rest. Picture a single hydrogen atom, the simplest one proton with one electron. The proton sits at the center. Now walk the electron out to where it actually orbits. If you blew that proton up to the size of a marble and set it on the floor of a cathedral, the electron would be a speck of dust drifting somewhere up near the ceiling, and everything between the marble and the dust, the whole vast interior of that cathedral, would be nothing at all. No smaller particles filling in the gap. No thin haze of matter. Nothing. That is one atom. Now build a body out of roughly 7 octillion of them. 7 followed by 27 zeros. Cathedral after cathedral after cathedral. All of them almost entirely air, stacked into the shape of a person sitting in a chair. So where does the mass go, if the space is empty? Into the marble. The proton and its neighbor the neutron are dense past imagining. The nucleus holds more than 99.9% of an atom's mass in about a trillionth of its volume. Ernest Rutherford found this in 1911, in a lab at the University of Manchester, and he found it almost by accident. His team, Hans Geiger and a 20-year-old undergraduate named Ernest Marsden, fired positively charged alpha particles at a sheet of gold foil so thin it was only a few hundred atoms deep. They expected the particles to sail straight through, barely nudged, because the reigning model of the atom pictured mass smeared evenly across it like fruit in a pudding. Most did sail through, but roughly 1 in 8,000 came bouncing straight back toward the source, as if it had hit a wall. Rutherford said it was as astonishing as firing a 15-inch naval shell at tissue paper and having it rebound and hit you. Why did that one particle bounce? Because it had struck the marble, the nucleus, head-on, and the 8,000 that passed through had simply flown across the empty cathedral and out the other side, never coming near the center. That single experiment told us the shape of everything. Tiny dense core, enormous empty surround. Which raises the question that actually matters, the one the ghost framing skips right over. If the particles fly through the empty space, and my body is nearly all empty space, why can't my hand fly through the table? Here is where most explanations reach for the wrong answer, and I did too, for years. The easy answer is electrons repel each other. Like charges push apart. Your electrons are negative, the table's electrons are negative. Negatives repel, so you don't fall through. That's not wrong, but it's nowhere near enough, and if you stop there you'll have the same shallow understanding as everyone else. Electric repulsion is real, and it does part of the job at very close range, but it cannot explain the sheer, uncompromising firmness of a floor. Do the arithmetic on electromagnetic repulsion alone, and solids come out far softer than they are. Something else is holding the line, something with no force behind it at all. It's a rule. The rule is called the Pauli exclusion principle, named for Wolfgang Pauli, who worked it out in 1925 when he was 25 years old. And it is one of the most quietly load-bearing facts in your entire body. So let me translate it out of the physics and into something you can hold. Every electron in an atom occupies a particular state. You can think of a state as a specific seat in a specific row, defined by its energy and a couple of other properties. Pauli's rule says something absolute and unnegotiable. No 2 electrons can ever sit in the exact same seat at the exact same time. Not prefer not to. Cannot. It is forbidden by the deepest grammar of matter. Picture a theater where every seat can hold exactly one person and not one more. Now try to push a second person into an occupied seat. It doesn't matter how hard you shove. There is no force you're fighting. There's simply nowhere for that person to go. The seat is taken. To put them somewhere, you have to find them an empty seat, and the only empty seats left are up in the higher balconies, which cost energy to climb to. That climb, that price you'd have to pay to force electrons into already occupied states, is what your hand feels as solidity. When your palm presses the table, you are not mostly fighting electric repulsion. You are running out of empty seats. The electrons in your skin have nowhere to go that isn't already occupied by the electrons in the table, and the rule will not let them overlap. The table pushes back not with a force, but with a refusal. Read that again, because it's the strangest true thing I know about your own body. The floor holds you up with a law, not a substance. There is no wall of stuff under your feet. There is a prohibition, written into the structure of reality, against two electrons sharing a seat, and that prohibition is strong enough to carry a skyscraper. Now, some physicists will push back on how I've split this, and they're right to, so let me be honest about the seam. The exact division between electric repulsion and Pauli exclusion in ordinary contact is genuinely debated in the details. For two everyday objects at everyday pressures, both are in play, and untangling their exact shares is not simple. What is not debated is the big picture. Without the exclusion principle, matter as you know it could not exist. Atoms themselves would collapse. Every electron would tumble down into the lowest energy seat, all of them piled into the same state, and the whole airy cathedral structure would implode into something unimaginably dense. The emptiness of the atom is not a flaw. The emptiness is held open, seat by seat, by a rule that forbids crowding. If that just rearranged something in how you picture your own hand, and there's a stranger layer coming, about what happens when the rule finally loses. This is the moment to subscribe, because that section is about 4 minutes out, and it's the reason I wanted to make this in the first place. Let me put the two effects side by side with a physical model you can actually reason with, because I promised you working pictures, not slogans. Imagine two crowds of people, each crowd standing on its own moving walkway, sliding toward each other. The electric repulsion is like the fact that each person carries a magnet that pushes gently against the magnets of anyone approaching, a soft, spread-out resistance that grows as they near. The exclusion principle is completely different in character. It's the fact that the walkways themselves have a fixed number of standing spots, and once every spot in the overlap zone is filled, no amount of pushing creates a new one. The magnets slow the approach, but it's the spots running out that stops it dead. Two different mechanisms, one soft and one absolute, and the absolute one is why your keyboard doesn't yield when you rest your fingers on it. There's a recognition here you've felt your whole life and never had words for. When you knock on a door and it sounds hard, when you set a glass down and it clicks against the counter, when you lean back and the chair takes your full weight without a millimeter of give, that firmness, every single instance of it, is electrons refusing to share seats. You have been feeling the Pauli exclusion principle with your own skin since before you could speak. Nobody named it for you. It was just solid, and you moved on. I'd bet most of you never once suspected that the plainest, dullest fact about the physical world, that things are firm, was one of the most exotic rules in physics hiding in plain sight. I'm genuinely curious whether that lands the way it landed for me. So what happens if you win? What if you push hard enough to start forcing electrons up into those expensive higher seats? What breaks first? Here the story leaves your kitchen and goes to the sky, because the universe runs this exact experiment on a scale you cannot ignore, and it shows you both what the rule can hold and what finally overwhelms it. Take a star like our sun. For most of its life it holds itself up against its own crushing gravity by burning. Fusion in the core pushes outward. Gravity pulls inward, and the two balance. But the fuel runs out. When it does, gravity wins the outward argument, and the core collapses. What stops it? Not fusion anymore. The Pauli exclusion principle. As the core squeezes, electrons get crammed closer and closer, and they begin running out of low seats exactly the way your palm does against a table. Except now, the whole weight of a star is doing the pushing. The electrons resist being forced into occupied states, and that resistance, called electron degeneracy pressure, is strong enough to halt the collapse of an entire dying star. What remains is a white dwarf, a ball roughly the size of Earth holding the mass of the sun, held up by nothing but the refusal of electrons to share seats. A teaspoon of it weighs several tons. The same rule that keeps your coffee cup from melting through the table is what keeps a dead star from crushing itself out of existence. But here's the part that shows you the rule has a limit, and this is the layer I most wanted to reach. In 1930, on a boat traveling from India to England, a 19-year-old named Subrahmanyan Chandrasekhar did the calculation that his elders didn't want to believe. He worked out that electron degeneracy pressure, that mighty refusal, is not infinite. If a stellar core is heavier than about 1.4 times the mass of our Sun, a number now called the Chandrasekhar limit, gravity finally wins even against Pauli. The electrons get crushed into the protons, matter reorganizes into something denser still, and if the core is heavier yet, nothing stops the fall at all. The rule that holds up your floor and holds up a white dwarf has a breaking point, and above that point the emptiness you're made of does not survive. The cathedral collapses, the marble and the dust are forced together, and the space that made you solid is gone. Sit with the symmetry of that for a second. The very same principle operates at both ends, in your fingertip resting on a page, and in the last stand of a collapsing star. One law, spanning 40 orders of magnitude, from the pressure of a pencil to the death of a sun. Now let me correct something in my own favor, because I'd rather you trust me than be impressed by me. You'll often hear the atom described as 99.99999999999% empty space, a string of nines people love to quote, and I could lean on it hard to make my point. I won't, because it's shakier than it sounds. That number treats the electron as a tiny dot orbiting at a fixed radius, and the electron isn't a dot. In quantum mechanics, it's a spread-out cloud of probability, a smear of where it might be that genuinely fills the region around the nucleus. So in one honest sense, the atom isn't empty at all. It's full of electron. Just electron that weighs almost nothing, and takes up space in a way our word occupied was never built to describe. The mass is concentrated. That part is rock solid. But empty space is a convenient picture, not the final truth. And I'd rather hand you the messier real thing than a tidy number with 15 nines in it. That correction actually deepens the point instead of weakening it. Whether you call the atom empty or call it full of feather-light electron cloud, the solidity still doesn't come from stuff pressing on stuff. It comes from the arrangement, the seats, the rule, the refusal. Firmness was never about how much matter is present. It was always about how matter is allowed to be organized. And if that distinction between how much is there and how it's arranged was new to you, hit like. It's the one signal that tells the platform to show this to someone else who's been picturing themselves as a ghost made of empty space. Let me close the loop on your two hands, the ones you pressed together at the start. When you push your palms harder, they compress a little. Skin flattens, blood moves. But the electrons in one hand never touch the electrons in the other, not in any meaning of touch you'd recognize. They can't. Touch, at the level of the electron, would mean two of them occupying the same seat, and the rule forbids it. So the deepest, most intimate sense of contact, actual surfaces meeting, is something you have never once experienced and never will. Every hug, every handshake, every time you've held someone's hand in a hospital corridor, there was a hair's breadth of enforced separation you could not cross. The rule that keeps you solid also guarantees you never quite touch anything at all. There's a strange comfort buried in that, and a strange loneliness, and I don't think you have to choose between them. You are held up by a law rather than a substance. You are separated from everything you love by an unbreakable rule, and joined to a dying star by that very same rule. The emptiness inside you isn't a void where something should be. It's the space the law holds open so that you can exist at all. I want you to try one thing tonight, and it costs nothing. Set your hand flat on a table and press, slowly, and pay attention to the exact moment the table stops you. That firm line where you can go no further. Feel for it. What you're feeling is not wood. It's the oldest refusal in the universe, the same one propping up white dwarfs 1,000 light years away, meeting your skin in your own kitchen. Tell me in the comments what surprised you more, that you're almost entirely empty, or that you've never actually touched anything in your life. I want to see which one gets people. And if there's someone in your life who thinks physics has nothing to say about being alive, someone who'd smile at the idea that they've never touched a single thing they've loved, send this to them. It's a better conversation than most. You are mostly space, held open by a rule, and you have never once touched the world.